How's it going, everybody? Jeff here, and we are talking through the breach. So I thought there was no one better to have come on for a little chat here than WyrdMatt. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. So before we get into it here, I mean, I'm sure there's some folks who may not have seen the last time. I guess when the Ten Thunders expansion came out, close to like a year and a half ago, maybe a little more than that. I had you on for a very long chat about Through the Breach and lore and all kinds of stuff. But for folks who may not have seen that, do you want to just kind of give us an idea of who you are, your background, and what you do at Wyrd? I know you guys wear many hats over there, but if you can give us an idea at least.
Yes. So my primary role there is I run the Through the Breach department. So expansion books, one shots, penny dreadfuls. I sort of oversee all that and write a fair bit of it myself. Um, and sort of the secondary job is assisting obviously with Malifaux and through the other side, and really making sure that all the lore and all the characters are where they're supposed to be. Everything is sort of canon, and making sure that we don't step on our own toes when we're making something. So yeah, just creative stuff all around, and a lot of that does eventually go into Malifaux. But I'm happy to say that a lot of it does start in Through the Breach. So traditionally where I lay.
Very cool stuff. That's got to be a harder job than it sounds like, to keeping track of everything, making sure you're not stepping on your own toes, because the lore has expanded quite a bit just in the last
Oh yeah,
handful of
oh yeah.
years. So
We're digging through one first edition books, being like, no, I told you we did this or that character did that. So it it may sound funny, but like there is stuff that we still pull on from 10, 15 years ago
for
that
sure,
is still relevant in stories today. So
yeah.
uh,
So I know you had a big part in the at least the last two Through the Breach expansions. Is that about when you started spearheading the Through the Breach stuff? I guess the
yeah, so
Dragonborn book.
yeah, my first big project was from Nightmares, and I came in, they're like, all right, great, you got this book that everyone's been waiting for, so just have at it. And then I think that was well received. So then obviously we continued on to From Shadows and peppered in some one shots and adventures through there. And now we're at Onward, which is the latest expansion that's going to be coming out soon, and it is focused on the Explorer Society.
Very exciting stuff. A lot of open questions with the Explorer Society, so I'm hoping that we're going to get into that stuff. But before we jump into it here, I was thinking maybe I guess this video should be going up right about a little before the book officially like is out. It comes out in January this month, but it's usually the very end. So the book won't be available quite yet when this goes up, but I was thinking maybe we could give away a copy to some folks that might comment on this video.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, if anyone comments, I assume you'll be entered into a drawing of sorts, and then we will reach out to you after DefectiveDice does the drawing, and we will get you a free copy of Onward in PDF form. And if you want it, you should have a drive-through RPG account. That's super easy to set up. So yeah, comment and let us know what you thought and all sorts of things you're excited about. And you might get a chance to get a free book.
There you go, and just include a flame emoji. That's the pattern that I do to make sure that people are intentionally entering. So put a flame emoji in your comment. Let us know what you think about the book or what you're looking forward to, and then we'll randomly pick somebody. They'll get a copy of the book. Very cool stuff. I had to wrestle Waldo to make this happen. So I hope everybody appreciates it.
Just we do it once, we do it every single day. So if you're not experienced, it's
It's a time.
monumental task.
There
Yes.
you go.
So
Exactly. So yeah, let's get right into it. So Onward is the Explorer Society themed expansion, and if anybody's kind of new to this, since the core book, every expansion has been like specific to a faction from Malifaux proper. So I guess my first thing that I'm curious about, and I've heard this from a lot of people in the community, is why do you hate the Outcasts? Because we don't have an Outcast book, and now we got an Explorers book, and they're new.
yes. So officially, unofficially, we consider the core rules to sort of be the Outcast book. There is a lot of Outcasts are obviously a very weird faction. We're just sort of everything put together. So we did feel that the core rules kind of did represent that very well. But if there's enough interest, who knows? There could be a little minor expansion at some point to focus a little bit more on some of the least interesting, most human, and also most terrifying eldritch creatures and tyrants and plagues all working together in one. So yeah, that is the official weird answer, at least for me,
Okay.
at this time, at the time of writing. So
Yeah. Yeah, I've always thought that I mean, there's a little bit of Outcast stuff kind of in every book. Like the Bestiary usually has a bunch of stuff that you'd find in Outcast. So I've always kind of thought that an Outcast expansion might not be necessary, but a lot of people have brought up to me that like, with stuff that's going on down in Freehold and with the Brotherhood of the Rat, there is a bunch there. I think that some folks would like to see fleshed out. So
for sure, but actually, you do bring up a good point of like, if you look, there is a little bit of outcast stuff in every book, just because it, it's that nice faction where anything can fit if you wiggle it around a little bit,
yeah,
and
it's just other.
other everything else, it is a true faction. It's not just everything else that we couldn't find a spot for. We promise. No, but there's a lot of outcast love in the office, and surprising amounts of stuff do make it in through all the books that you would find.
Yeah. So I want to go through the kind of structure that we usually see in the books and just kind of pick your brain and talk about some of the new and interesting stuff in there. But before we get to that, from a kind of a higher level, did this book pose any particular challenges to you, either in terms of writing? Obviously, I'm expecting a huge expansion of the lore for the Explorer Society, because that's a big part of a lot of these books. Usually, it's the first 50, 60, 70 pages is just background and lore that we don't have yet. Um, were there any particular challenges with writing for the Explorer Society, either from the lore perspective or from the mechanical perspective, because they're kind of new, and even though they've kind of been around in the background of the lore for a while, there wasn't a lot established for them, whereas for like the Neverborn and the Ten Thunders, we have a lot of like the clues. We have a couple of breadcrumbs that were then just kind of elaborated on, whereas with this, I feel like you're kind of just taking it whole cloth. Like, we have very little about them up until this point.
Yeah, especially from the lore perspective, it was interesting to try and figure out how things would organically fit into the world when, basically, like you said, Uber mixed the society, and then here we are today. So they've always been in Malifaux, and I think that that's something that Weir does very well, is that even if something is not in the forefront, there's always a way that it can still affect the world from the background. And figuring out where to put the Explorer Society in that particular situation was, I think, the biggest challenge lore wise, because we want to tell you all the secrets. We want to tell you everything about everything, but there is that mindset of we have to keep some stuff secret. We have to keep some stuff secret not only for ourselves, but just to make sure that we have plot points that haven't been realized yet can kind of have be built on in the future. And like I mentioned, just that we aren't writing ourselves into a corner, being like, oh, we said Gretchin Janus was this or that, so now we kind of have to continue going on
Right.
with that. And also, the biggest challenge aside from that was figuring out what to include and what not to include, because for the first time, this is uh, I believe, the first time in Malifaux that we are going beyond the borders of Malifaux City and the sort of the general map that everyone knows and loves. So we're going to get information on three sort of new areas, and
Mm.
yes, and so there was a lot of internal discussion about, again, what do we tell, what do we not tell, what do we hint at, uh, what do we just plain out state. So figuring out what to include, how to include it, and what not to include, even though that sounds very general, was definitely, I think, the biggest issue for everyone in the company, because we all love the explorers just for how random and crazy they are, but you still have to ground it a little bit and be like, all right, we can't go too crazy yet. There's still more stories to tell, so let's have them have their own space and time to shine. So yeah, that's will be happy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because obviously their thing is, I mean, they're the explorers, so they're all about going out and finding out some of the weirder and crazier things that are going on, and expanding the board, like the map that we have up until the end of second edition is basically the city and like a few hundred miles outside in any direction. So even just since they've been introduced to the game, we've seen the ocean on the other side of the bayou and a lot of things expanding. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing more of that. I want a pretty new world map with more weird things.
Yes. Yes, there are, to confirm, there are maps in the book. We've heard you,
Excellent.
and the maps have made a return. So there will be those for people who enjoy a little bit of cartography as well.
Sweet. Awesome. So, Through the Breach expansions usually kind of follow a pattern, and I think every one of them has pretty much opened with a big section on lore. What can we look forward to learning about the Explorer Society and in just generally, I guess both about like the people as well as just the organization as a whole?
So there's a lot that I really want to say, but I will keep some surprises for people who are going to get the book and read it. But there is a lot of confirmation on who slash what slash you know whatever other adjective you want to say, what Gretchen Janus is, what her goals are. We get a lot of her history, and we uh, give characterization and a lot of past to, I think, one of Malifaux's most known unknown characters. I've seen a lot of speculation about her, and so it was very fun to kind of build her into a fully fledged person rather than just I'm the head of the society and I like collecting things.
Right.
Um, so a lot of the history section is focused on her and sort of her individual rise to power until we get into describing the society proper.
Very cool. Yeah, she's definitely been a huge question mark ever since I guess the Explorers specific faction book a couple years back. So I'm looking forward to some clear answers there because there's like you said there's a lot of speculation about what she might be or what she might be up to and
Yeah, and I,
obviously
and I think people will be surprised, but there's also some very interesting things about her that I think people have not quite picked up on yet. So being able to again explore those and sort of uh, give her a deeper personality and deeper motivations to why is she doing the things she's doing um, was definitely very fulfilling. And it makes her, I think, one of my favorite characters in the world. So hopefully everyone else agrees, even if she's not exactly what you thought. And then after we sort of describe her, we get into the society itself, sort of how it runs, and obviously there is the society, and then there's things like Condor Rails, the Department of Ungentlemanly Affairs. There is, all these sorts of bits and pieces that are part of the society, maybe not. They're in there through contracts or things like that. So we also wanted to focus on actually just what the society is and what it does sort of in a day-to-day basis. So we get a lot of new characters in the form of basically heads of departments. So we have a head of biology, we have a head of botany, we have a head of um, spectral and metaphysical encounters. So really, there is that a fun mixture between sort of the mundane, like, oh, I know a lot about rocks, and characters who are like, I collect cursed items and I make friends with ghosts, and that's just how I choose to live my life.
just another day at
Um,
the office.
yeah, so there's the full spectrum of this is fairly standard for Malifaux, and this is completely nuts. League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, levels of weird. Um, but as always, they all sort of find a way to work together and mesh and meld in a way that does feel very uh, organic, which was also super important for us to make sure that this wasn't just everything we could think of smushed into just a group that kind of call itself explorers because they are a society. They do explore, do check things out. They do hunt treasure. That is still at the core of what they do. So making sure that we still have information for players who want to focus more on that aspect of the society. They have a lot to sink their teeth into as well.
hmm Do we get an answer as to whether the Department of Ungentlemanly Affairs still has the office at the pumping station? Because that was always one of the more interesting little bits of just flavor from some of the older stories, and it's kind of an open question because they don't really work for the Arcanist anymore.
Yes, there, not to that question specifically, but there is a lot of clarification on not only what people have been doing since the events of the Society Faction book and the Malifaux Burns trilogy, but there's also some information on what is happening after that. So the DOA in particular is dealing with that in an interesting way. We
As
get
they
some more
do.
information. Yes. So we get some more information about their futures as opposed to yes. So people can decide if that office is still there or not in their own games, but we've not revealed if that lease is up yet. So
I've heard people say that once Ramos was gone, they probably just got kicked out, and I don't know, I'm a little skeptical. I feel like I want to say in my heart they're still there, but that'll be my version of canon for now. And the other thing I'm curious about, I think some of the best bits from the last couple of expansions were about the specific characters. I think characters are my favorite part of Malifaux. Um, do we get a lot of insight into some of this? Particularly, I'm thinking of like the masters from the Explorer Society, although obviously anyone else too. Do we get a lot of insight into those characters, and specifically, I'm thinking of like their motivations for being part of the Explorer Society? Because we saw, I mean, light spoilers for Ash's Malifaux. But we saw, for example, that Jedza was not really into working with the explorers after her one adventure that she owed kind of Gretchin a favor for. So I'm curious if we get any exploration of those types of things.
yeah, so the I guess relationships that the Explorer Society has with a lot of the masters who are in it, I think is more unique than other factions because
Yeah.
Gold, Arcanists, Gremlins to an extent, they all sort of have at least some kind of united front of this is our goal, this is kind of what we want to do. But in the Explorer Society, every master is doing something different. Anya wants money and power and full blown capitalism. Cooper just wants to hunt, so we do explore kind of not only the individual motivations, but also what the society offers them. So there are these relationships that are sort of deepened a little bit, and it also kind of explains what might happen in the future because the society is not in a great position after the latest book. Again, minor spoilers. Um, so this book also does cover a little bit of like what might be going on, what some people are thinking. They're like, Gretchen kind of messed up a little bit. So this is a chance for people to stay loyal, but also they're still allowed to pursue their own interests and goals. If those align with the society, great. If not, how do they manipulate and kind of uh, get away with doing that without alerting sort of these sponsors and these webs of very powerful people who
Yeah.
essentially are next door neighbors that you can't ignore. So they're your business is in their business, and it all becomes this very odd um, political sphere that is interesting, I think, because these masters are definitely don't have a lot of love for each other, but they all find use for each other, and that is always fun to explore with characters who are not super moral or super great, and being able to give them agency to act in ways that they feel like acting is something that we did also push when writing sort of the bios for each of the masters.
I just want to point out that you just confirmed the Explorer Society are the bad guys, because a lot of people in my Discord argue with me about that all the time.
And that's going to be another interesting point is that I think a lot of people have because they're so new there are a lot of preconceptions about what the society does and up till now we've only really seen the front. We've only seen what they want everyone to see.
Right, the
And
PR
this does,
spin.
yeah, this definitely peels the curtain back of like, is Anya truly an absolutely ruthless, brutal, rail baron? Maybe, maybe not. Is there a reason she's that way? Is there a reason that, are there other things that she's participating in that are making her paranoid about, being found out or losing power? Why did Gretchen offer assistance to the guild. Why is she collecting all these artifacts? Why does anybody do everything? Why does anybody do anything? Um, is something that I think people will be interested in reading. There's a lot of motivations and reasoning behind things that have been done that haven't totally been illuminated in the stories yet, but I think this will give some good context for why people are doing what they're doing.
Yeah, I think back to that. I can't remember the name off the top of my head because I'm terrible with names. But the first story we got in the Explorer Society book, where they're all kind of like meeting at the Explorer's mansion and having a conversation about just kind of like business, and we really see that they're not, like, to the point you just made. They're not all there. They're clearly not all there for the same reason, and it's not even clear why any. Some of them are working with the society. So I'm definitely looking forward to getting a little bit more insight into that and understanding why the characters are even involved in the first place, and what they're getting out of it in the long run. And especially Anya, because I think Anya is a super interesting character, but so far we've gotten so little of her. She's kind of shown up in the background in a couple of scenes and done a few things here and there. But just reading her blurb, her bio blurb, I feel like there's so much potential for that character to be super interesting.
Oh yeah, and obviously, the more layers a character has, the better. And I think that yeah, this is definitely a book for people who like character consistency and just like knowing things. Because this does throw a lot of weird questions and a lot of well, why did so and so character do that? A lot of that is cast into a much clearer light.
Mm-hmm.
Not totally clear, but at least it'll give people a little bit of direction when trying to figure out, are they truly evil? Are they not? Are they good? So who knows?
Awesome. Sounds great. So the last question I have on the lore, because I think if I didn't ask this, there would be a riot. Um, so I'm not going to ask anything specific, but do we get a mention of Collodi at all? Is the word Collodi in this book?
There are some interesting little tidbits that are there if you look for them.
Okay.
Whenever I write stuff, I love including tiny little hints that not
Little
everyone
Easter
will get.
egg.
Oh yeah, and if you're looking close enough, you'll kind of be able to kind of see not only Collodi but a couple other presences in there that people might be surprised by. Um, so yeah, he's not in there directly. He is still headless, unfortunately, but his spirit lives on in the words.
Good to know. I think people were very pleasantly surprised when there was a pretty clear mention of at least Collodi's body in Ashes. So that's cool to know that we're still getting little sprinkles here and there. The hope is still alive. So every one of these books, one of the more interesting, at least from a mechanical perspective, I think every one of these books comes with its own new tarot character creation system. And usually there's like a different process to go through that allows you to build a character themed around that specific faction. So in Neverborn, you can make a Neverborn character of various species. In I think it was the Arcanist expansion, you can make a construct character. I know this has been sort of teased a little bit because I've played some games at cons and stuff like that, but so I know a little bit about it. But what can we look forward to seeing new and exciting from the tarot in Onward?
The tarot is called the Compass Tarot, and it is a way for players to get their characters sort of jump started into joining the society. That was a big point of interest for the book. Was, well, this is an organization, that attracts people, so let's let's have it just be just that. So the Compass Tarot allows you to get a pretty good head start, like I said, in joining the society. And to do that, it also ties in with a new mechanic we've included, which is society honors. So if you are a character who has done something that is noteworthy, and there's four different sections based on sort of achievements, that can be exploring, contributing to kind of understanding areas ecology, bringing back samples, sort of anything that you would do in the area of exploration, really, that kind of helps this society expand its influence and understand Malifaux and kind of any world around it. Um, you will earn honors. So these can either be gained immediately, where it's like, oh, I have society contacts. We're kind of working towards this. They're writing down everything that I've done and helped with, or it can be retroactive. So it can say, oh, we're aware of you. The society is sort of recruiting you, or you will be inducted based on kind of merit, sort of like Maxine, like great scientist, rich oceanographer, so
Has a
she
boat.
kind of immediately gets a yes. So she gets a quick pass in there. So Compass Tarot is a way for characters to again get a pretty significant head start with doing that because it does take time and effort to gain all these honors. But yeah, it also gives a little bit of background for your character as well. As for example, are they a historian? Are they a treasure hunter? Are they a collector of weird objects? Are they just interested in history? Um, Enough storytelling material where if you want to play again like your standard librarian who just likes to look at old books, or someone
I
like
do. I do want to play a librarian.
of course, um, or someone who is just you know off their rocker with I'm covered in 16 different curse items and I'm perfectly fine with it. The Compass Tarot allows you to do that and sort of make this process much shorter.
So is the idea that going into building the character, you'll sort or as a I guess part of the process of building the character, you're going to establish some sort of like backstory and reputation that your character has, and that's why they're being
Yep,
a kind of
exactly.
they're interested in bringing them on.
Exactly. So, exactly like for a couple of the other tarots, it was based on physicality, like you are something else, or it's sort of based on your future or kind of how fate itself might shape things. But for the Compass Tarot, it literally is, your character has already been working towards making a name for themselves in one of these fields, and that's earned them recognition. So, not only do they earn honors, but there's also ways to get uh, benefits. So if you are a member, or if you have a certain number of these honors, you can request things from the society. And that can range from everything from magic items to personal assistance to even requisitioning help from one of the masters. So there is a lot of incentive to kind of uh, really go out and have your character improve themselves and sort of conquer the world. And in doing so, they will sort of be rewarded and supported for their efforts, which will allow people to kind of go bigger and more expansive and more wild with campaigns if that's what they want to do.
Very cool. That I feel like that's gonna be a really good jumping off point to start some interesting adventures if you want to theme a whole campaign around that process and like kind of building yourself up within the society.
Yeah, absolutely. But we also made sure that because not everyone wants to be walking around in the bayou for 6 sessions, so we did make sure that if you just want to be an explorer by yourself, you can of course do that. So
Mhm.
I think the system fits very well for people who want to go full force. Everyone's going to be a member. We're all working towards the same thing, or someone who just goes there casually and is, like, hey, can I borrow this thing or that thing, and can also be a way for Fate Masters and players both to um, have a little bit of a way to, if we really need a magic item or a grimoire for something, that's very specific. It's pretty likely the society is going to have it someplace. So if you work towards it, you're going to be able to have a lot of tools at your disposal. So
Very cool. So I guess from a mechanical perspective, I assume there's going to be like a way to track the honors and like a point system, like you mentioned, to show like how advanced somebody is in the society. Do you see that as, or do we know for sure? Is that like something that the Explorer Society does in universe? Do they have like a gamified system for their recruits, or is that more something above the table where we're using it to track, but they handle it a little bit more informally?
for them, it's a little bit more informal, but it's definitely there are I would say ways where, for example, one of the honors is if you help the society, you even just participate in helping it run, you'll get a little bit of honor for that. So, um, do I think they have a big logbook of things? Probably not, but there is definitely a merit system of like if you're able to do the job, you get promoted much faster than someone who is just kind of you know not really able to do everything that they say. Because they're going to find out real quick if I did this or that, and then they're like, all right, well, go do it again, and do it better. And if you can't, then you're going to be probably just on luggage carrying duty for quite a while. So
You'll be a hopeful prospect for the rest of your
yes, yes, forever and ever.
life. If you're enjoying this video and you want to support the channel, then there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. The first would be to pick up some merchandise through my merch store. You can grab a t-shirt, a hoodie, a mug, a sticker, all sorts of cool stuff like that. You can also shop using my affiliate links. So if you're going to make any purchases from any of these companies, you can use the links in the description below to make your purchases, and it will go directly to supporting the channel at no extra cost to you. There's also a link for my Ko-fi if you would just like to give me a tip, or my Patreon if you want to support me longer term. I have a bunch of different tiers there, and there are all sorts of benefits available to people, such as early access to videos, ad-free videos, the opportunity to vote in polls about upcoming content, and extra entries into the giveaways that I run occasionally. But if none of that is your cup of tea, no problem at all. Just make sure that you're subscribed to the channel and leave a like on the video. It actually helps a tremendous amount. And if you want to go the extra mile, then consider sharing the video out with some friends who you think might find it interesting. The YouTube algorithm is not kind to small YouTubers, so that helps a whole bunch. Other than that, consider joining the Discord, also linked in the description, where you can come and hang out with me and the rest of the community and talk games. But with that, let's get right back to the video. So then another big thing that we typically get in these books is a set of new pursuits, usually quite a few. Anything notable or exciting? I assume that a lot of these will tie in very well with all of that sort of honor system and doing stuff for the society.
Yes. So there are 4 new pursuits, and I believe you have Art of the Methodologist, which I'll go into a little bit of detail. That's super cool. These 4 pursuits are unique in that they split off. So each of these pursuits, once you hit level 5, you will have an option to continue down the basic pursuit path. So, for example, the methodologist can continue going all the way to step 10 as a methodologist, or you can start picking a different path. So the methodologist can sort of specialize into a geologist or a biologist or even an astronomer. And then each of those subsections is going to have five talent steps where players can really focus on that particular specialty, instead of just being like, I'm going to try and manipulate some of these talents or actions or abilities into something that I really want, versus okay, these are 3 different ways to play the same pursuit. They all have the same core kind of functionality, but their secondary parts are far more unique and really help, I think, push that narrative of there's a lot of sciences, there's a lot of world to go around, there's a lot of variety in everything, and this is a way that players can easily explore that without having to homebrew a lot of stuff or change too much around.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I feel like if you compare Through the Breach to a lot of other RPG systems, that's something that's always kind of been conspicuously absent, is like subclasses or whatever different systems call it. But because of the way that Through the Breach encourages multiclassing, you never felt like you needed that, because if you wanted to kind of specialize, you could just, or if you wanted to build your character a particular way, you could always just play a different pursuit. It's very easy. Not only that, but it's kind of rewarded for playing multiple different suits. So now adding like subclass type things on top of that, I feel like will expand the character creation or your character growth options pretty wildly, because now you can choose from each one of those. Are the subclasses exclusive, like mutually exclusive? Can you if you, assuming that you upgrade, you level up enough, could you do multiple subclasses within one of those?
Currently, no. So the idea was that you do specialize into one of these particular routes, but I also think that it adds in a lot of replayability,
Yeah.
because then you have 1 pursuit, and you're like, well, I have 2 or 3 ways I can play it, and they all end fairly differently. So not just play a behemoth again. I'm going to play mage right again. You have different ways to experience a pursuit that is familiar, but again, like I said, the end is definitely fun and super tuned to the subclass or the name that it has.
Yeah, I think the replayability is huge. The people that I play Through the Breach with, a lot of folks in my community that play with me regularly, they constantly make new characters because they're like, there's just too many fun and interesting different ways that I can build characters that are so unique compared to other RPG systems because a lot of the pursuits focus on not just combat. It's you have pursuits that focus like you were talking, science classes. Like you wouldn't see an astronomer unless it had some magical tie-in in another system. But in this, it's like you have all sorts of strange and interesting things. There's got to be, I don't know, 40, 50 pursuits in the game at this point. How difficult is it? Because like from a flavor perspective, the lore of Malifaux is big enough that you can always come up with, I feel like, new ideas for just from the in terms of the flavor, what the pursuit will be. But how hard is it now to differentiate them mechanically? Because again, I think one of the huge strengths of Through the Breach is that you don't have to just focus on combat. There are classes that are focused on like action scenes, like ongoing challenges and things like that. And there's also characters that focus very heavily on role playing. But there's still a limited amount of mechanics. So how hard is it to design these new pursuits and like make them not feel like just a carbon copy of another pursuit?
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. There were, because like you said, there's a lot of pursuits and a lot of them do cover ground, and especially because we see pursuits as it's an archetype. You are going in with the idea that this is kind of going to be a fighter who focuses on heavy weapons. I'm going to be a bureaucrat who focuses on boring people to death with talking. Um, and so trying to find pursuits and those archetypes that have been covered yet was a little difficult. And actually, that's what helped birth the specialization system. Is we had a ton of these ideas, but it was like, well, filling up 10 steps for an astronomer and keeping it interesting. Having people want to engage with that step one and that step two. Um, it was certainly challenging, and it was like this is definitely not only mechanically but narratively there was starting to get to be some overlap between some things. So that helped birth the specialization system. And really, even though there aren't as many pursuits in this book as in others, they each feel very rich in that they use existing mechanics and some new mechanics as well, but they really sort of push the system to be the very best it can be. So, there are things that you might have to bookkeep, for example, like how many of a certain material do I have? Do I actually have the time and energy to devote to doing in pursuit ongoing challenges that will help me not only expand my character narratively, but will also help my character mechanically. So some of these pursuits will have, like I'm going to study the mysteries of the universe, and it might be an ongoing challenge that takes a super long time, but after you complete that, you are going to get a permanent reward for sort of really delving into the narrative of whatever pursuit you've chosen and helping reflect that there's all sorts of different ways to play a character, and I think that sometimes people forget that a character can grow even in narrative spaces. There's a lot of thoughts like, well, I have to accomplish something, or I have to level up, or I have to, continually try and fight things and encounter these very difficult and aggressive situations. But I wanted to push the idea that people can also improve themselves, and they can kind of, take time to see what else is out there. And I think that taking that perspective as well really helped shift a little bit of oh, this pursuit seems too similar to this one or that one. Just looking at it in a different way was really helpful to be like, oh well, this is similar, but mechanically it can be completely different. So I'm hoping that people will enjoy that kind of a little bit of a new take on how to play a character for these sorts of pursuits.
Yeah, I forget. So I recently did a video about like how to level your character up, just as like an explainer. And I forget where somebody had commented, but somebody had asked about like the session structure and whether they should be having their characters level up every time they play, or like how that should be organized. And one of the concerns that they had was like, what if nothing happens? What if we play 3 sessions and nothing of any real significance happens because there's no combat, there's no nothing like that. And one of the points that I made to just like what you were just saying is that it doesn't just have to be a big combat encounter that is what levels you up. One of the my favorite things, probably my single favorite thing about the system is with this destiny steps. It's about the character progression. It's about like your character's confronted with some question, some decision that they have to make, and how they handle that decision is kind of the point of the level up, right? It's like some important life event is happening, and that doesn't mean a giant beastie. That could be making a decision about a friendship that you have or a business contact. It can be there's a million things that it could be, and it's how your character handles that represents the character growth, not just did you get better at swinging your sword.
Absolutely, and I think that being able to carry that over, because I think the Destiny steps are great, super great help for people who are looking for a little bit of structure, but also like, how is this going to end? How do I how do I try and incorporate all these different things that are going to happen um, into a campaign? And I think being able to take this book and as an opportunity to reward curiosity, like yeah, there's an old house, check it out. You never know what you might find. Uh, you may just casually be walking around and something inspires you and you're like, oh well, that really does narratively fit in with gaining the next step in this pursuit or picking a new one, or kind of being able to do things outside of just straight wanting to advance and get to that next step.
Yeah, and it might seem mundane in the world or to other people, but it's important to your character individually.
Exactly, and especially for these pursuits, like, oh, doing those mundane things is sometimes even crucial to how the pursuit operates.
Yeah.
We have a lot of things where it's like I'll just swing my sword, but for the Explorer Society book, we wanted to be like, let's reward preparation, time, care. Again, find beauty in the little things, and have an opportunity to really push and explore a narrative system that I think the game presents and executes really, really well.
Very, very cool. I'm very much looking forward to that. That sounds awesome. I wanna just play a scientist and a nerd in my games. Just
Yeah,
all
so if you want, I'll talk a little bit about the methodologist, who is
please.
exactly that scientist and nerd. So the idea for the methodologist initially was sort of like an alchemist, like someone who's using chemicals and science and sort of proven formulas and theories to create magical effects. And this is kind of the same way that it wound up manifesting in this book, but it is a great chance to increase your stats in the mathematics skill that is finally one of the
The
underutilized.
most important of
Uh,
all skills, that and
yes,
bureaucracy.
yes, but now it actually does have a good purpose. So being able to use that and focusing on again the sort of exploration of how the world works using now it's not magic, it's science. It's I'm combining these two elements to create this ball of fire. I'm not using sorcery at all. It's something completely different. Um, and so that is sort of your standard mage for Onward, but it is completely different from what you'd expect. It is that sort of scientist, artificer. I'm going to create a very weird and unique spell because I just know how to do it. Because I'm aware of I read the books, I've read the papers, I've
Yeah.
been to a university, I've been able to study and see beyond kind of this fog of just magic and realize, oh yeah, these are actual processes that are happening.
Right. It's always been funny to me. I think different stories handle it differently, but in Malifaux, there are a lot of stories that really treat magic like a force of nature. It's like magnetism or gravity or something like that. Where if you understand it, you can just it doesn't require you to be a traditional mage in a fantasy setting. So that's really interesting to see that this will lean into that because that sounds like it's right up my alley.
Yeah, and not only that, but each the methodologists and also the three sub pursuits also have something called magnum opuses, and these are sort of glorious, strong, unique items that a character can create over a long period of time. and they are significantly powerful. It ranges from a version of the Philosopher's Stone to being able to turn things into gold to creating poultices and all sorts of various things that on first glance again do seem arcane or impossible or just otherworldly, but they're really just it's just science. And I think that being able to have those goals, that's actually an example of sort of the expressing narrative through gameplay as well, as I want to make this thing. I have to put in time and effort to make it. It's not just going to happen. I have to gather these ingredients, and I have to study and really put forth a good chunk of time to uh, get this reward, which is going to be great, but it's still something that I have to kind of think about and keep in the back of my mind as the game is going on.
Right. So is each of the so you said there's four pursuits. Does each of them have three sub pursuits? Is that the structure?
The yes, so each one has two, and then the methodologist does have three.
Gotcha. Okay. So quite a bit of variety there. And then does that mean that there will not be advanced pursuits in this one?
Oh, there are advanced pursuits. There are, I believe, five, and you have art of one of them, which is the paleontologist, and that is a way to animate the dead and use necromancy without being super resurrectionisty and evil about it. You certainly can be, but this is also an idea of like what would a paleontologist in a world where necromancy does exist, how would they use it? How can we express that? And so this is going to focus more on animating skeletons and super old things rather than new corpses, because bodies are a dime a dozen in Malifaux, right? But finding things that are in old graves, finding just a full skeleton, which a lot of resurrectionists ignore because animating just bone is super difficult. The paleontologist allows you to kind of fill that niche role and create this little force of living fossils and make them significantly difficult to deal with, but also helps you kind of potentially skirt a little bit of guild oversight because they're not really walking. It's articulation. It's
Cool.
these
Doesn't
are
look
these are
like a
things
zombie to
that
me. It looks like a
yeah.
skeleton.
I mean clearly there's not no threat to anybody, right? So again, like resurrectionist, but with a little bit of a twist.
Does that mean that we're going to be getting more information about the ancient inhabitants of Malifaux, or is it more just kind of generally, oh, there's bones. We'll animate them to do what we want.
The latter, the latter. Mostly because a little bit of a lore tidbit. A lot of the old Neverborn bodies are super far away
Yeah.
from humans. Obviously, very sacred spaces and kind of cairns and burial grounds that I don't think humans have ever encountered, and if they did, they didn't live long enough
Right.
to
They didn't
to
make it
talk
back to
about
tell
it.
the tale.
But the Explorer Society, that is exactly what the Explorer Society wants. They're like, we kind of want some Nephilim skeletons, so go up there and bring a couple back. We'll give you some money, or we'll let you enter
You're disposable.
the society. Yeah, I mean, come on, quick in and out adventure, 5 minutes, it's
Yeah.
fine.
Nothing could possibly go wrong.
No, of course.
Very cool. So another big chunk of most of the books is some new magic and equipment, and you've already kind of touched on like new flavors of magic here, but um, oftentimes that stuff is kind of backwards compatible with other magic classes if you just want to be a standard mage. Do we have anything like that here, or is a lot of this stuff specific to these new pursuits?
No, a lot of it is definitely still usable, backwards compatible. It is. We always try and make sure that even if something is specifically created for a pursuit, for example, the methodologist uses one of the new magical pursuits, which is scientific method. That's kind of their bread and butter and how they resolve all their magical
Right.
um, abilities. But it is certainly still usable for any other character who wants to sort of go down that road of like, I claim to know science, but also it might just be my innate magical talents manifesting, and I'm not actually as good a scientist as I thought I
Right.
was. Um, everything is, of course, can be used through all kinds of any of the expansions, and a lot of these spells will focus on some new conditions as well. So we have some new general conditions that are introduced in the book, and they touch on a couple things um, where other conditions haven't, and hopefully they'll give Fate Masters also some ability to fight back against Fated, who are super super strong, and making counters a little more balanced, because that is certainly something that can happen in Through the Breach, is where people just start steamrolling through anything that isn't a master or a tyrant. But a lot of these spells, I think, will add some flavor to not only the sort of science and natural world motivated society, um, as well as the uh, kind of more mechanical, interesting, cutting edge stuff that you'd also expect people who are just kind of in this, it's the forefront of discovery in the new world. What are they doing? What are they making? And how do these spells kind of affect common people and the world around them in ways that they might not expect? So there's definitely a good handful in there that Fate Master should be like, oh, finally there's a written way that I can get a little bit of an advantage over Fated that I've let get too strong. So
That sounds great to me because I run one shots on the channel and they're just open to the community, and there's definitely downsides to doing it that way. I do it because I want it to be inclusive, and especially for like people who've never played before and kind of want to learn the ropes, and it works very well for that. One of the downsides is when you have a mixed party and I don't know what they're gonna be, what to expect from the players when they come in. We will often get a mix where it's like, here's this one, two players are like super narrative focused, their characters barely have any combat ability, and then one player is just like they've min maxed the crap out of this character. Super, they're level 0 and they have a min 4 accuracy 7 weapon, and I'm like, I didn't think that was possible. So having ways that I can debuff them a little bit and make combat more fun, that sounds fantastic.
yeah, and it's especially nice when it's just like, oh, I go right there, everything's laid out. You don't have to try and homebrew it on the spot of like, oh, I need a solution right now.
Right.
Yeah, there's solutions laid out for you, so you can be as uh, fair, but get your digs in every once in a while with Fated, who think that they can. We like to start off with minimum 4 damage profile. That's good.
Disgusting.
We love that. Yeah.
Dogmatize. I'm calling you out. And then so then there's usually a big equipment section. The last book, the equipment section was wild. There was some stuff in there that was pretty crazy. We had like artillery pieces that had just crazy, insane damage tracks and like all kinds of interesting stuff, but also very thematic to the both, I guess, the Three Kingdoms as well as the Ten Thunders. What can we expect out of this? I imagine that the explorers have some interesting tech that maybe other people don't have access to.
Actually, you phrase it perfectly. There's a lot of equipment in here that is only accessible through Society honors or is in Society vaults. So you have to kind of engage with them a little bit to either permanently have it or rent it. And that's super fun to include in campaigns because there is some stuff that is very strong. There's a version of Cooper's rifle that is
Oh,
just absolutely disgusting. But at the same time, it's very expensive and
I
it's
bet.
very hard to get.
Yeah.
And there's also a lot of other specialized things that will kind of help a lot of people who are in the weeds, because obviously we want to push through the Explorer Society. They should explore. So a lot of these items are also very helpful with surviving the wild. So there are things like traps and flares and a lot of things that you kind of overlook a little bit in everyday life, but when you need it, you're like, oh, this would have really been nice to have. So there is a lot of focus on, I guess you would say, multifunctionality. For example, one of them is like the botany saw. Like, old Victorian gentlemen used to have canes that would, the handle would pull out, and you'd have a saw, and they could just like do gardening on the fly. Absolutely an Explorer Society thing. And so if you have it, not only is it a weapon, but it also will help you deal with overgrown areas. It'll help you deal with plants and other creatures that are filled with chlorophyll and want to eat you. So
Very common in certain parts of Malifaux.
yes, very, very, very much so. Um, So being able to really go completely wild and being like, hey, here's some insane thing you could use for one session, alongside a lot of this very standard and typical explorers fare, is I think a nice balance between the weird and the wonderful of like, yeah, we're you might want to have, nitro rifle, but you might need to pick up anti-venom. I mean, you might need to pick up, all sorts of, healing, uh, hits and, specific tracking arrows, for example. So there's a lot of help given to players who feel like their characters might not be completely ready to set out on an adventure like that. These items will definitely be helpful for getting a party ready and being like, hey, you at least have a chance now. Don't go in completely blind, because here's some things that will definitely help you deal with probably, most of what you might encounter in the wilds of Malifaux.
Yeah, I've had quite a few adventures hinge on the party's ability to like get a torch. So I like that there's going to be a little bit more of that because I think one of the more interesting parts of any RPG is the sort of prep, like trying to prepare for what you might get into and like and um, you know having more equipment that'll help you tackle certain situations. That sounds really interesting. I can't think of what adventure it was off the top of my head, but I remember there was an adventure where I think it was an ongoing challenge, and there was a way to get like climbing equipment that gave you positive twists, and the party would never have been able to make it through that ongoing challenge if they didn't have the climbing equipment. But because they did, and they prepared correctly and thought about it, it allowed them to get through it. So that sounds cool to get some more stuff like that.
Yeah, and it is satisfying, like you said, as a Fate Master, to be like, oh, they actually do think about these things. It's not just like, oh, if we're frozen in the wilderness, I mean, we can have a fire, right? I mean, maybe, but if you actually plan on these things, then I think it adds a lot more realism and depth to the game and just decision making in general. Like, you can almost buy that super cool thing. You just have to, get the things you need first, not the things you want.
Yeah, and it also makes it feel more like a real problem that the characters are encountering because if you just go in and brute force it and you just have the cards and it doesn't matter, then it's like, was this really a frozen mountain that you climbed or were you just on a stroll? Because it seems like you were just on a stroll. But on the other hand, if it's totally impossible, that's not satisfying either. So having well, what are we going to need? We know we're going up a mountain. It's covered in snow. Okay, we're going to need some warm clothes. We're going to need some climbing equipment. We're going to need some fire. All these things. It makes it feel much more like a real situation that these people are encountering.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Cool. So some fun new equipment, some special equipment that is only available to them. That's a pretty new and interesting thing for sure. Are there any larger mechanical additions? I know, like in the last book, we got some real estate rules, which was fun. Anything along those lines that is kind of brand new to the game?
Yes, people have been asking, you've all been asking, and we have answered. There is finally rules for vehicles in Malifaux.
Uh-oh.
There's a whole chapter on aquatic
Velocities.
vehicles, land-based vehicles. Actually, yes, and even airships.
That's what I wanted.
So yes,
Yep.
yes, and not only is there are a ton of different vehicle types, but a lot of them are pretty easily achievable for a group to purchase or own. Um, the more expensive ones, again, you can rent them from the society. You can, incorporate them for characters or Fate Master characters who are a little bit more well-to-do. Um, but at the same time, we also included like licenses and registration. Like, it's still something as simple as that, but um, it also encourages that, changing the mundane into something magical of like, I'm operating a vehicle, but the more I do it, the more skilled I become at it, the more effectively I can use, whatever I'm kind of driving or sailing or riding on. So that is also another thing to kind of encourage players to continue, exploring on different things that seem like, oh, this is just a way to get from here to there. Maybe, but if you're good enough on, say, a motorbike, you may be able to pull off crazy stunts at some point, just because you have that much experience. And again, you stuck with it. It's rewarded you. and
The
yeah,
only way to
you'll be
play a
able to.
performer, you can be a motorcycle performer.
I see, but like, like that is, and it's see, since it's not linked to any sort of pursuit, any character can do it. It doesn't cost, like a session, or it doesn't cost, a valuable step or a talent. Um, it's just something that everyone can do, and you know, you can even make your own vehicle if you want. So there are, again, like the goal is to make everything as customizable and sort of easily accessible as possible. So even if you are playing that very bookish librarian, might know how to, might be an absolute beast at sailing a ship. You never know. So it can also come in handy with certain adventures. Like there's adventures where you are sailing, or there's a guild ship, or you're in an environment where you're like, oh, I might be able to apply what I've learned here to this sort of situation. So being able to officially kind of introduce vehicles and being like, hey, hopefully this is a fairly solid rule set for including them, and um, having them work fairly smoothly, was something I was super happy with.
Very cool. So, what can we expect from as far as like the rules that were given for the vehicles? I assume there's like prices or ways to acquire them. Do we have like information about travel times and things like that? Because that's something that I've always struggled a little bit with. Like how long does it take to get to certain places depending on how you're.
Yeah, because travel times are a little bit vague here and there.
And I think there's a good reason for that. Like we don't know the exact size of a lot of things because we want to, I'm sure that you guys want to leave that open ended, but when I'm just throwing stuff out there, sometimes it's a little tricky to get it kind of
Exactly.
right.
Yeah. No, there is sort of a rough guideline for that. It's not like, here's every location, here's how long it takes to get there, but yeah, there's definitely sort of like a little operation manual of of how to work each vehicle, and kind of its unique traits, and certain things that you might benefit from if you're riding in it. For example, like a car, is might offer armor if you're inside, because obviously you're protected. An automated carriage, even more armor, might be able to handle difficult terrain more easily. So each one is, yeah, there are pluses and drawbacks to each one, and I think people will enjoy kind of experimenting with these, and figuring out the nuances of each different one, and how they can be included in games, like I said, either personally, or kind of just as uh, an aspect of the environment that Faded can interact with. Since all the rules kind of focus and are applicable to all the vehicle types, it's a very easy kind of thing to grasp and include, without having to do too much extra paperwork, and remembering things. So
Yeah, yeah. And then is there anything in there? I guess you kind of mentioned some things will give you armor and stuff like that, but is there anything in there specifically for vehicles in combat? I know we've gotten a little bit for mounted combat on animals, but can we do like motorcycle combat or anything like that? Or
there's not official combat rules, but there are, I believe there are rules for, if you hit someone, this is what's going to happen. um, Obviously, it's hard to be like, my weapon of choice is truck, but if you hit someone, it can be effective. It it's going to cost you in the long run, but sometimes, I mean, that's it. It's just there can be no other solution to a problem except running a truck right straight into it. So
I mean, if you've met my fated, you'd know that that's like that is usually solution number one. That's usually the first thing they think about doing.
suddenly, boat from the sky, just
Yeah.
um. See, now that's just we have to include that somehow.
Yeah.
Just random event, boat
Yep.
from the sky.
I think it's required. I think you have to.
Actually, speaking of boats falling from the sky, it's actually a great time to talk about the locations as well, because that is actually fairly important for one of the key new spots in the expanded map of Malifaux. We have three new spots, so we're going to explore a little bit more to the west. We're going to hit the deserts and kind of see more about what the Oa have been up to, kind of what maybe some of their civilization looked like at one point.
Mm.
We're going to go a little bit more south, past Innocence, to the sort of plateau there, and I think people will be pleasantly surprised to see how many sorts of weird anomalies very much focused on obliteration are there. There's definitely some influence in those locations, and they're also very they're some of my favorites as well because they introduce questions and give no answers yet.
Yeah.
Like how does this how is this happening? You're like, well, I mean, that's part of the adventure. It's you can it may be revealed at some point in the future, but until then, you can trek down there and have fun by yourself.
Hmm.
And then the ship's falling from the sky. We do get a little bit more of the oceans, so we finally get to kind of see what's been going on down there, where the hordes are coming from. And one of the spots, as you can probably guess, does involve ships falling from the sky. And it's they're all three are a great. It was great fun to just kind of make all of them be like, there's Malifaux weirdness, there's historical weirdness. How can we smush it all together and make something that feels completely natural? If you see this in the first time you go there, you're like, oh, clearly that. I mean, yeah, it's falling from the sky. That's of course. Like, I'll note that down in my journal, back to the society, and they'll reward me for noting that. Um, so yeah, there's three maps, and all those will cover some pretty significant and plentiful locations for people to explore. Because we want to get people out of their comfort zones and to really kind of push campaigns into places that they've never been.
Yeah, the ocean thing I think is super interesting. I love the story with Maxine when she first appears down the ocean, and that's like kind of the reveal that there was an ocean there because we didn't necessarily know that at the time. We have this nice little piece of art here. I'll throw up on the screen of a giant sea monster that looks like it's gonna eat a boat, and
Yes.
I want you to tell me about this because I'm a little scared.
You can think about that what you will,
Okay.
but it is in the section with the ocean, and that is just a little very not subtle breadcrumb to the Fate Masters that while these locations are obviously super uh, new and fun, and we definitely want people to explore them, going too far off the map, there will be monsters.
Here there be
There's
monsters.
definitely stuff. There's a reason why people haven't gone too far outside. Um, and that's another part of the book we wanted to push is that there are legitimately very strong, very terrifying things out there, and if you face them and come out on top, again, great, but more than likely it's going to be a significant challenge and more of a oh we made a very very big mistake moment if you're not exactly prepared to figure out how to handle these sea monsters that could easily swallow a boat in just one gulp.
Yeah, yeah, it looks like very easily. I'm curious. That looks like a sailing ship from like 100 or 200 years earlier than this. Is that? Do you think of this as something that like people would see in the universe as like the way we would look at a map from that time and see an older boat, or are there still sailing ships around in Malifaux? Do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there are still sailing ships, and that's reflected in the vehicles as well. Because I mean, if you're getting something that's been mechanized or fully metal in any capacity, it's expensive. It costs a lot not only to run but to make and maintain. So there are still definitely wooden barges and wooden sailing ships and kind of just very tiny little boats. For everyone who is unable to afford, the luxury of a guild juggernaut, but still needs to get from point A to point B. So you might not see sailing ships in the Fortune River in the center of Malifaux City, but they're definitely still around.
So I
Uh,
can
so
just go do a pirate adventure in Malifaux, is what you're telling me. That's what I'm hearing.
absolutely, yes.
Nice.
Everything in this book has exactly what you need to run a pirate adventure. Main selling point right there. So
Absolutely.
yes,
I'm gonna try to get Zip on board, but we'll find out if he's down for it. I need to acquire a reputation that he'll be impressed by before he'll join up for
exactly
sure.
right.
Yeah. Very cool. I'm really looking forward to that. I didn't know about the vehicles, so I'm really curious to see what kind of stuff we get in there because that's another one of those things that I feel like the lore has like hinted at different types of vehicles that we might see, but there's never really been, obviously the technology is kind of a sliding scale because soul stones and magic and stuff like that. So
Mm.
I'll be really curious to look through that and see the types of vehicles that we can get our hands on and see what our players do with them. That'll be fun.
Yeah, and people should if you're again worried about players just zipping from point A to point B and completely derailing a campaign, it's still Malifaux City. Like the reason we haven't seen vehicles yet is it wasn't built for cars or wagons. Really, everything is most of the city is not maintained very well. It's dangerous. It's expensive. It is, it's going to be a challenge to reliably and consistently use a vehicle. So for picking when and where you want to and need to use it, is going to be, I think, a point of importance for a lot of people who want to kind of delve into the realm of quick transportation.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's entire parts of the city as well as a larger world that you just is not accessible for most vehicles because getting into the quarantine zone in a car not gonna be easy to do. Usually, you have to go
Unless you climb a wall, then you are out of luck.
yeah. Usually, you have to go over a wall or through a tunnel to get there. So it's not gonna be doable. So then the last big chunk of most of these books would be the Bestiary, which usually has some combination of stuff from this faction that we see in Malifaux and that we know about from the universe. We get some stat lines so that we can include them as NPCs. But then we usually also get some new stuff, and the new stuff a lot of times is just a tease for what we're getting in the future in Malifaux. So this is a very fun section of the book. My first question is, who's narrating this Bestiary?
Yes, so there is someone who is very interesting. I will not reveal who the narrator is, but
Oh,
the identity is very crucial to the lore. It is someone who, again, that's sort of a little Easter egg that I've put in there. It may be obvious to some people, maybe not be obvious to others, but it's important in various ways to sort of how the society functions. So we get sort of field notes and his own personal observations about a lot of these things here and there that he has been dealing with or forced to deal with during his time in the society. So I'm excited what people will think about him, but no more on that until the book comes out.
fine. We'll know soon. Um, that's cool. I'm always excited to see. It's a fun way to give like a little bit of personality to the character that does the narration. So I really like that you guys do that. It's very cool. Um, so we also usually get a stat line for a high level character from the lore, like a master or a henchman. Um, are we getting that? And can you tell me who it is, or are we going to keep that a secret?
I can tell you, it is Lord Cooper himself,
Oh boy.
an absolute beast. He is probably one of the most terrifying masters we've ever put into a profile.
Which is saying a lot
Man,
because Zoraida is already has a stat line from
yes.
one
Well,
shot.
I mean, Zoraida is almost a thing in of herself. Like that's just like you're not going to win if you deal with her. It's just not good. Just it's here you at least have a chance. With her, it's like she's already won and she's
Playing with you.
just human. Um, but Cooper's been included because one of the honors is actually surviving one of his hunts.
Hmm.
So there can be an entire session based around surviving a hunt by Lord Cooper using the profile here,
Wait.
and
Just to clarify, do you mean you're going on a hunt with Lord Cooper, or Lord Cooper is hunting you?
he's hunting you.
Okay, that's what I thought. You're a runaway.
So yeah, so if you can survive what he's got, then that pretty much guarantees that you're going to be entered into the society. So again, definitely a very very dangerous way to try and get a membership, but it's possible. So I'm excited to see what people think about our hunter of everything.
People.
I guess they signed a contract. It's fine. It's all legal.
Sure. Yep. That's definitely how that works. Yeah, that sounds interesting. I'll be interested to see what that gun does to someone in Through the Breach because it's pretty nasty.
Yeah. Oof.
And then yeah, so any other less dramatic, I suppose, profiles, anything new and interesting to look forward to out of that bestiary? I have some fun art
Yes,
here of
yes,
something
yes,
wild.
yes. You can put that up. So we, again, in the theme of Here Be Monsters, we wanted to put forth some actual significant challenges to characters who may be higher level or who are looking to really make a name for themselves in exploring the world, and just also filling out these other spaces that we haven't really touched on before, because obviously putting inhabitants in there makes it feel alive, and it reduces the amount of questioning and kind of fumbling a Fate Master has to try and think about when introducing a party to that to particular area. So pretty much every major area. So there's the deserts, the weird toe, and then the oceans. All have received monsters, which, if people are familiar with some of the Penny Dreadfuls and one shots, the monsters characteristic has been present for a little while, and it functions a little bit differently from other kind of, I guess, typical monsters in the bestiary, where they're very hard to hurt. They have significant weaknesses, so being able to research them, study them, observe them is going to be very beneficial in eventually defeating them.
Mhm.
But two of the ones we have, so one of them that you have there is the Etten, which is a gigant monster that tends to live in the very highest peaks, and is giants are tough, and that thing is just ridiculous in a good way. And the other one is the Hydroxylurid, which is, as you can see, a Silurid that's clearly had some issues with.
Cosmetic surgery, maybe.
Yes, just a little bit. But again, so you would normally find those in Sanker Sid, which is the sunken city in the bayou, um, or in the coastline of the ocean. So being able to populate the world with true horrors that I think even experienced characters are going to have a tough time against. That was very fun, just because big scary zombie monsters is always a good time.
Yeah, for sure. And I love having stuff that I can throw at my players that they don't recognize from Malifaux, because it's hard to separate your out of universe knowledge and your in game knowledge. And I think a lot of people will try, but like everybody knows what a Silurid is and roughly what they can do. Everybody knows what a Malifaux rat is and what it can do. But when you throw a Hydroxylurid at them, I don't know if they're going to know how to handle that. That's going to be fun.
Yes. Yeah, there's going to be there's definitely some curveballs in here where it's going to be different than you expect. And of course, familiar faces, a little bit of smattering from all the different keywords, but yeah, the monsters are definitely the nearest and dearest to my heart for for this particular book.
Yeah. Do we know, so a Hydroxylurid, do we know how, lore wise, how it got like that? Is this a different branch on the sort of tree of life for the Silurids, or are they mutated because of some external source? What's the deal with that?
Yeah, so as we know, Silurids are highly mutable, and they can change constantly, even based on just environmental factors. Like the Buckaroos, we kind of see Silurids with more like tadpole-like features. Then we have the spawn mothers and the gups, and so they're a fun little amphibious group to play around with. And so the Silurid is again, it's not expressly confirmed because these are notes from society members who have kind of gathered up information and have made it back
Right.
to report. But there are thoughts that this is kind of a mutation gone wrong, so sort of a cancerous, just constant replication of cells that emerges in the form of multiple necks and and heads, or it could be something more sinister from the sunken city that is actually tainting them. For example, we saw the white Silurids with black blood in one of the old Ten Thunder stories with
Yep.
McCabe and,
McCabe,
and, and
yeah.
Jesse. So there's weird stuff going on there too. So
And there was
we
also a
we went
machine
into.
that seemed to be doing that, so that's why I was curious of how this abomination seems to have arisen.
Yes, there's a lot of forgotten stuff, but making sure that, again, like, Fate Masters and players should be able to explore for themselves and be like, okay, in our particular universe, this is going to be the reason why it has so many heads, as opposed to another. So, um, little plot threads for you, and hopefully people will take those and run with it, and even inspire entire campaigns or entire sessions about, is it a machine? Is it just this, this insane one-off? What is it? We need to figure it out.
Yeah, I think the Sunken City is one of the most interesting unanswered questions in the lore for sure. I'm always excited to get a little bit more about that, because we've seen it and it's come up a handful of times since then, even in the most recent book. But we really don't know what's going on down there. But it seems bad.
It is, and of course, this book explores that. There's more
Uh,
lore about it.
I'm excited. I'm excited. I can't wait to dig into it. Um, is there something out of the bestiary here? So I mentioned before that like a lot of times stuff out of the bestiary later comes to Malifaux proper. We've seen that pretty much in every expansion since I've been following the game. Is there anything out of this bestiary that you would be particularly excited to see come to the skirmish game or to TOS? I guess if that's what you're
Let
for.
me see. So obviously, completely unofficially, this does not mean anything that I
Yeah,
say
this
is
I'm specifically
is
asking
fact.
for your opinion, not.
No, I've always loved big models. I think that big models are just they're super fun and are great centerpieces. So I think that adding just bigger monsters in general to Malifaux would be super fun. 'Cause I think that opens up an entirely new world of, if you have 80 plus keywords, what is a monstrous version of their ace in the hole going to look like? For the giants, obviously it's the add-in of like, ooh, that's kind of a new thing that I want to add in there, and it fits in really well. Um, I would say I think the still rate is pretty up top for some of my most favorite monsters in this book, or
That would be a
entries in this book.
crazy model.
Yes, very much. And it's like, is it too much? Yes, but
Maybe.
I always love too much, and I'm always like, make it work. It's
Yeah. I mean, I think the if there's one thing that Weird does head and shoulders above every other company that does miniatures, I think it's the models posing specifically. I think especially in the last couple of years, the posing on the models has just been fantastic across the board. So I would be super super curious to see what the sculptors and the modelers would do with that piece of art. You give them that art and see what they turn out. I bet it would be incredible.
yeah, and not only that, but it's just like even if you don't play whatever keyword it would go into, it's just fun to paint. It's just this fun, crazy little guy who's like just causing trouble. Um, So yeah, I would love to see bigger models overall, but the two I picked out are pretty, like I said, are ones that I would love to see, especially that I think could even work if we didn't decide to kind of increase the scale and put in a whole bunch of big models per crew. I think that these are tame enough that it would work without causing too much of an issue.
Right, without adding completely new layers of rules to and base sizes and stuff like that.
We don't talk about the Manosaurus Rex.
We don't talk about
His base size is fine. It's fine.
You just have to mount him vertically so his tail is on the base
Yes.
and that's he's pointing up in the air. So I'm curious for you, being very intimately, involved in Through the Breach and knowing it very well inside and out. Um, do you think there are any mechanical gaps or things that the game sort of needs? In addition to, obviously we got vehicles in this and that's cool. That's something that I think has been um, certainly talked about for a long time by the community. But do you think there's anything else that still the game needs or would be especially helpful to be added to the game in the future?
Well, actually, funny you should mention that because today we are actually releasing a rules update for Through the Breach. So it is a sort of a comprehensive look at um, all the rules, and we've identified some rough patches, some spots where people are like maybe not having as much fun as they should be, and we're sort of smoothing that out and aiming to help games go a little bit faster, not be super bogged down with a lot of um, rules that maybe haven't aged super well. So being able to address that has been actually super helpful because now we can sort of move from that point and be like, okay, how are we going to tackle ongoing challenges? How are we going to tackle, um, giving out sort of critical hits or rewards for players, or how are we going to adjust adventures and expansions based off of kind of this little bit of a refresh.
Wait,
Um,
so this literally
but
posted while we were having this conversation.
yeah, yeah. So,
So I have not had a chance to look at this yet. I might have to have you
yes,
back next week after I've looked through
yes.
this.
So hopefully people like it. It's not a major overhaul of it's still the Through the Breach that you know and love, but certain things like ongoing challenges. Going through them, I was like, well, there's a lot of if you fail, it's just kind of it's a failure. It's not really huge, but if you catastrophically fail, okay, that's kind of when things start rolling and happening. So, for example, ongoing challenges have been made a lot smoother. So you will have a success or a failure, no matter what you flip. And each of those is now very, very important. So um, you'll have the option to kind of take your time and sort of make sure that you can get the flips necessary to accomplish a task. To do that, though, you need to double the duration for that particular flip. So instead of taking an hour for a challenge, you take 2 hours, but you get a positive flip to what you're doing. So we wanted to include that to not only make these challenges, which a lot of people feel can be very repetitive or boring or kind of just narratively lacking a little bit of like, oh, well, okay, I failed. All right, I failed. I finally succeeded. This adds a little bit more tension and more storytelling opportunities, not only for people and players who are experienced with accomplishing whatever um, skill the particular challenge might be going for, but also giving players who, if you really can't move silently at all, if you really can't convince somebody of anything, you can use this new mechanic to help you with that at the cost of some time. So, um, yeah, it was mostly things like that where parts of the game that were very time consuming without a lot of contribution to what was going on certainly got addressed. 'Cause and even in things that I've written, I try to be like, if you fail a challenge, here's 6 things you can read out to players to kind of facilitate, not making this challenge so, drawn out or hard to deal with.
Right. And do you see that as something that should work going back through the, dozens and dozens of pre-written one shots that have been put out?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the main goals was we wanted to make everything retroactively applicable. So everything in the rules update is essentially uh, completely compatible with any one shot or expansion book. There might be a few odd things here and there, but as far as we've seen, there really haven't been too many, if any at all. For example, soul stones, their laid is actually now important. Um, and if you, for example, if adventure says give out a soul stone with laid 6 as a reward, that's a lot. So if you feel like that's too much, as we always say, this is your game, so you can adjust things as needed. Um, but for overall, it was really just intended to dust off some of the cobwebs and really just accentuate the fun parts and speed up the parts that dragged a little bit, so you can get right back to having fun in Malifaux.
Very cool. Well, I'm looking forward to reading through all the changes, and I'll probably do something else on that in the near future. But that's a funny coincidence because literally I saw the ping from Weird News as we were talking, but I was like, well, I'll look at that later.
Little did you know, it
Very
was
very relevant. So I guess as we kind of wind down here, I just wanted to ask, just talk to you a little bit about the pre-written one shots because I know you've written a bunch of them. I recently posted the Blood and Snow playthrough, and when we finished that, I don't remember if everyone officially said it, but many of us were like, I think that's our favorite one shot that we've seen so far.
awesome. Thank
Really,
you.
really enjoyed that one. I thought it was super. It kind of had everything I want out of a one shot. It had some really interesting exploration of an area of the lore. It had some interesting combat encounters. It had a lot of different ways that the adventure could go. It wasn't super railroady, even though in a one shot it's always going to be to an extent railroady. It had some opportunities to explore things. It had some action scene. It had ton of good stuff. There was a lot of really good tension with like trudging through the snow and like not knowing if they were going to make it. So really super enjoyed that one. When you're approaching writing a one shot to be kind of published and tackled by a lot of different people, it's not just something you're writing for your own particular group. Um, what are some of the challenges there where you have to kind of account for the different groups that might be involved in it? And what do you think are some of the best practices for designing a one shot in that way?
Very good questions. I think for adjusting based on difficulty, that's always going to be a challenge no matter what you do. Obviously, for people who are familiar with the one shots, we'll do, in this instance, you'll fight, 2 of this enemy, and then an additional number of enemies for every number of players. And I think usually that's been a fairly solid way of solving that. But There may be some one shots that are just super long or have very high TNs, or you just have other issues that certain players may not be able to overcome. And really, I think that's fine because, and this is something that I've been trying to kind of push a little bit of late, is that anything that's written doesn't need to be played as it's written. It can always be changed. It can always be made more difficult, more less difficult. We try to, or at least I try to, give people like make sure that like 80% of the audience can play through it without too much of a problem, and then give options or solutions for people if they fall in the 20%, if this is too easy or this is too hard. Um, but yeah, finding that balance is definitely a difficult thing, especially when as you've mentioned, there's narrative stuff, there's environmental stuff, there are enemies, and you have to consider the players and their pursuits. So there's just, I mean, millions of combinations that you have to kind of address, right? But it does come down to trying to figure out, does this feel right? Does this feel, you know, like most people can handle it? And that might seem silly, but eventually, as you kind of do it more, you're like, all right, I can kind of get a feel for, this is going to be, this encounter has an environmental hazard, so let's make the enemies a little weaker, not too much, but we have to don't want to pile everything on at once. You need to be very mindful of kind of distributing obstacles for players, and that'll sort of lead into one of the design principles I try to focus on, which is letting everybody shine. So letting every player or every character be able to do something in an adventure that feels good to them, and even if it's something very small, it might be super important, like being athletic enough to climb up a mountain and hoist everyone else up.
Yeah.
That might be an absolutely critical point. It might seem small, but adding in a challenge that relies on athletics or might or some sort of physical quality, um, making sure that, okay, well, I've added one of those, so let's focus on someone who is more mathematical. Let's focus on let's include a puzzle to solve, or let's focus on being sneaky. So trying to have a lot of variation, and I think that's why you guys, hopefully that's why you like Blood and Snow so much, is that there's a little bit of everything for everyone. It wasn't just we're slogging through 10 waves of enemies that just don't
Right.
stop, or this is all just a logic puzzle that is going to take 3 hours to solve. Um, Being able to balance scenes, not only to sort of move organically, but to feel like you're getting an almost cinematic experience. Like not every action movie is action all the time. It's there's ups and downs and lulls. So being able to kind of map those out and figure out where players are most likely going to experience, high points and low points, being able to kind of adjust scenes and encounters appropriately is, I think, one of the best talents you can have. Being able to diversify as much as you can.
Yeah, I was gonna bring up exactly that point of like it's almost like pacing in a TV show or a movie where there has to be some contrast, there has to be different. It can't, like you said, it can't just be 5 combat encounters in a row because that gets monotonous immediately. The second combat encounter, you're like, all right, we're doing this still. We're gonna just go through all that again. But an adventure like that, I think, is a great example of like it's almost structured like a movie would be, where you kind of start out in more of a social encounter, and there's an opportunity to kind of explore this quaint little town in the middle of the forest, and then you get given this task to go trudge through the snow, and there's hardship because of that, and then it kind of leads up to this climax with this thing that's going on that I won't spoil, but people should go watch the playthrough that I posted. Um, and yeah, like allowing lots of different types of player characters to participate, I think, is also super important, because you don't want to have a character that's really good at a bunch of stuff and they just stand around with their twiddling their thumbs because there's nothing for them to
Like I
do.
can't do anything. Like, and actually, what you mentioned about movies, if anyone is trying to write their own one shot or structure a campaign, I'd say that that's a great way to think about it. Is you want to have every scene should have a goal. There should be, this scene introduces Faded to the adventure and a character and gets them to scene two. What does scene two do? So having at least guidelines for yourself of like, they might go completely off off script, and that's okay and that's fine, and even people should feel free to do that. But as long as you have a very rough outline of kind of the points you want to hit, it's easy, or it gets easier um, when you're running an adventure, to kind of adapt the plan you had or the plan you thought they would do versus what actually happens. I still, hitting these 5 or 6 areas of interest of, like, there's still going to be a door. What kind of door? Well, it depends on where they are at the time. But as long as there's still um, that idea in your head, I think it helps with writing and playing a lot, because there is at least that little bit of guidance where you can always rely on, and kind of help string you on until you're kind of back on track, or a little bit more confident with where your group is going.
Yeah. So I know a lot of the one shots are written by kind of external writers, and there's some that are done internally, such as the ones that you write. When you are gonna write a one shot, how do you typically approach that? Is it like there's I mean I know you're a big lore guy, so is it usually like, okay, here's an area of the lore that I want to explore, let me write a one shot around that? Do you do it mechanics first, or is it something that's like given to you by the higher ups that are like, here, we need you to do this assignment, and then you start from there?
Fun answer. It's a mix of everything.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll get to choose, like for Blood and Snow, that was an idea that I had, and I was like, oh, this is, it's winter. It's kind of, this is going to be fitting to not only for seasonal, adventures, but also to explore a little bit more into the giants, and see, what else is going on up there.
Hmm.
There are cases like the one shot based off of the Malifaux 1966 box,
Mm.
the Mayfang Nightmare box. That was definitely like, all right, write a one shot, try to figure it out.
Make this fit the
And
universe. Go.
yeah, yes, exactly. And those both kind of are opportunities to do something that I think is super important. Is you have to try and introduce something new with each one shot each time you write it. And it doesn't have to be something drastically new. Like, you can still explore a house, right? That's fine, but figure out a way to twist it a little bit,
Mm.
make it unique, make it a little bit different. For example, people who've seen One Night in Hollow, that was the intent, was to kind of have a little bit of a surprise twist that people didn't really expect, and play differently off of expectations, and that was something that I hadn't really done before. So um, I'll normally write out what I want to do, or kind of the rough scene work of, like, okay, this is, like I said, those points. So this is kind of what should happen, or here's sort of how I'm going to figure out how to do this, and then fill in the mechanics as I go. And really, it's the most fun, most challenging, and most frustrating part, because it can turn out really, really great, but also there are some times where it's like, this is it's not working, or it's something that becomes too big even for a one shot. We've had one shots that get like half of a Penny Dreadful size, and you're like, this is too much. You got to cut stuff down. So, um, yeah, the major thing that I try to focus on is making sure that an adventure is something that people haven't experienced before in some way, um, and then everything after that kind of falls into place. But being able to have people around a table being like, oh, I haven't really expected that, or I haven't played something like that before, or this was different than what I was expecting. Um, to me is not only a good compliment, but it's also something that I think is important for uh, a genre like role playing games, where a lot of things can kind of get very typical, like go into a dungeon, fight the monster, and leave. That's a fine trope, but I try to figure out how that can be pushed a little further, or changed, or freshened up just a little bit, to give people something to inspire them, maybe to start creating things that are a little bit more away from the norm, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's always good to have multiple ways to tackle a problem. It's not just apply sword to bad guy. It's you can try approaching things in different ways, to the point you were making before about like allowing different character strengths to shine. I think that's a really important bit of it, for sure.
Yeah, and that's another thing we should try to push in one shots is like giving people love options, which is kind of it's like it's great, but once you start, people are like, "Where are my options? I want help, and I want to have something that I can lean on that is different than or that is narratively appropriate for whatever kind of game is going on." So being able to be like, "Hey, if it's too hard, or if you want to include this other little thing, feel free. It's an option." But I think that that's a further way to kind of get people interested in a game where you have an adventure and then there's 6 or 7 different things you can apply, remove, add in where you want. Um, yeah, so I see adventures as things to pull from as well. Like I still use old adventures and I'm like, oh, that was a really good mechanic or that was a good condition or something that um, got written, and I'll refresh it and I'll kind of lean on it as a driving force for a new adventure. So it's yeah, it's always fun to kind of see what the brain can come up with, and then figure out, okay, now let me think of what I actually needed to do, because whatever I've thought of is or it's been done before, or it's this is a little bit too old, so let's make it crazy and fun.
Right. So something I've been really curious about pretty much since I've been running through the breach and playing through the one shots and reading the one shots. Is there an internal policy or at least like thought process on the canon status of the one shots? Because obviously they're a choose your own adventure, so outcomes aren't going to be consistent. But there's a lot of world building, there's a lot of exploration of different characters and places and information that we get in the one shots. Is there a policy as far as their canon status, and if not, is there a way that you think about their canon status yourself?
Yes and no. So officially, it's always kind of considered that Penny Dreadfuls, like the full adventures, are fairly canon.
Mm,
A lot of those are based off, for example, the Nytheria campaign is very is very close to how things happen in the story. It
right,
might end differently, but I'd say 80-ish% of the setup is still the same. Um, for one shots like Blood and Snow, typically the idea is that the lore that's introduced in the beginning, so the base camp and kind of the uh, Jackie Amundsen and kind of her interest in gigants, that's all canon. And then whatever happens after that is certainly up for debate
right,
because there's just too many variations. Um, but for the most part, I think that one shots are treated as a great way to add in more lore to the world without having to explicitly say, okay, we're going to use this right now. Because I think a lot of things from one shots have been pulled up and like, oh, this area in Rottenburg was mentioned, so it's in the story. So there's sort of a loose connectivity.
the ferryman and Carrie are right out of a one shot. Yeah,
Exactly, exactly. And it's like if if we ever make characters like those two, it's like how is this adventure most likely going to end so that it doesn't necessarily invalidate how people feel about playing the adventure, but at the same time it's like she's still a criminal. She's still, she's what she was doing and kind of her past um it felt right to kind of have the new models when they were introduced into Malifaux. That felt like a good end to not only her but what we think a lot of people uh, in that Penny Dreadful kind of would have dealt with. So yeah, aside from like the super big adventures, nothing is explicitly canon. And then the initially first encounter chapter scene of one shots is usually um, canon enough where it's reliable stuff to include in the world. Not necessarily the adventure that follows, but it's definitely stuff to pull on as Malifaux grows.
awesome, very cool. I think that's roughly what I kind of assumed, because it's kind of I think the only reasonable way you can kind of handle that stuff, because obviously, like we said, it's a moving target. Everybody's gonna have a different outcome. I thought it was interesting that Fire in the Sky and Obsidian Gate, off the top of my head, have been like referenced in canon as like a strange group of adventurers that no one could identify did a thing, which
Yeah,
I thought was a
that's
clever way to handle it.
yeah, that's also a good company-wide thing of like this did happen.
Right.
A little bit of unreliable narration is always a nice little hint to making sure that not every single thing is canon, but it's canon enough
Broad
where
strokes. Yeah.
it
And
lives.
it,
Yeah,
and it makes sense too because in reality, most people wouldn't have perfect information about what went down there anyway. So they
exactly.
were in a different dimension for part of that adventure. Like,
You can't be trusted. You were seeing creatures and whatnot,
yeah,
and like, no, it was definitely these people. Like,
very cool. So I asked you this last time, and I'm sure that the answer will be the same, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Where do you think Through the Breach will go next? What do you think, or what would you like to see explored, or what do you want out of the next book? I want an Earthside book. I don't know if that's in the cards, but
oh, or side books are definitely possible. Really, any place we haven't explored a lot in Malifaux. Now that we have the factions all represented, I think there's a lot of time to do like smaller fun projects. It's something I would like to cover. I think that people would respond well to, you know, 15, 10, 15 page little, things where it might focus on, oh, let's focus on the Brotherhood of the Rat. Let's, add in a couple creatures here, sort of like the encounter box, but a little bit more expanded. So to give that opportunity of, adding in more lore for people who enjoy that, adding in ideas that ended up on the cutting room floor. There's a ton of stuff where it's like, oh, this is not quite enough to fit in this book. So where it ends up in this sort of limbo spot. But I think expanding in those ways with smaller, more focused supplements would be a great thing. Because I'm definitely up to make them, and I think people are always eager about the weird little bits and pieces, like in the augments that we give out. I think that there's always a chance to turn one of those into something bigger, or even do something completely different. Who knows?
yeah, I kind of love that idea. I think like a mini expansion would be cool to just focus on like one particular area and not be a not a 2 page augment, but also not a 300 page full on. Uh,
Just somewhere in between,
yeah.
it could be.
These expansions must be a tremendous amount of work. I'm always it's been I guess it'll be shy of 2 years since the last one, and that seems very quick to me for the amount of stuff that goes into these books. So very
I mean, as always, it takes a team, but the playtesters and everyone who reviews it is always super helpful because they'll let me do what I want, but they'll also be like, all right, you got to kind of reel it in a little bit. I'm like, "All right, I
yeah,
understand. It's for the best." So of course, look in the credits, thank everyone there, because it's I may lead everything, but there's definitely people whose opinions have helped shape it into what it is. So always happy to shout them out.
for sure. Yeah, awesome. I think that I mean this went way longer than I planned, which it usually does because we'll just sit here and talk about Malifaux all day. So I appreciate your time. Was there anything that we didn't cover that you wanted to just highlight out of the new book? I know we covered a
I
lot.
don't think so. I'm just excited for people to get to it. I've rambled a lot, and I've probably said the word explorer way too many times, but that is the goal. Go big, explore all the new stuff. I'm super excited that this is lore that people have literally never seen before, and it's the first place you're going to be able to get it. So, if you're interested in what lays beyond the map, this is absolutely the book for you. So,
I
I'm
plan
hoping
to take
people.
a vacation day from work the day I'm expecting to get the book in my hand and just devour it because that's usually what I do when new Malifaux lore comes out. So very
I'm
much
excited
looking
for the
forward to
video and the theories because people are going to be like, "What
there
does
will be
this
theories.
mean?"
I already have
Yeah,
a couple people planned to come on to do theory videos, so that's going to be a ton of fun. Yeah, so just as a reminder, everybody make sure that you check out Onward. It should be out about a week after the video drops, give or take. I know depending on your go check with your local game store. They'll tell you. And make sure you pick up a copy because there's a ton of really cool stuff coming. So that's something to definitely look forward to. And also, get down in the comments and let us know what you think, what you're excited about, and what you want to see, and put a little flame emoji in there, and maybe you'll win a PDF copy that you can get your hands on even sooner, courtesy of Weird. So huge thanks to you and Weird for putting that together. Anything else? Where should people keep up with you and Through the Breach and stuff that you're doing? Or anything else you
And
want to plug?
keep an eye on the Waldo's Weeklies. That is mostly where a lot of the augments are posted. You can go to Weird's website, which I just want to make sure it is weird-games.net. You can go under the Through the Breach tab, and there's a ton of resources, including the new rules update, which is a great addition. There's character sheets for all the different expansion book dated creation. And there's also all the augments that we've released as well, including Styx, who's the latest one, inspired by the some nefarious grim fairy tales told in those classic upbeat European ways of like, oh yeah, this child died. Isn't that nice?
Yeah, there you go.
But yeah, she's one of many free augments that we offer as well. So yeah, just make sure that you keep an eye on all the weird social media stuff, and that's normally where all the Through the Breach goodies will be posted when we're ready for them.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's always a ton of fun to talk Through the Breach and Mouthful lore with you.
Thank you for having me.
I want to send a huge thank you to the Extremely Cool Kids tier on Patreon, the Steam Power Scoundrels, Dogmatized, and Death. Thanks for watching.